What you're going to hear next is described briefly on your yellow sheets, and I trust that you all did get a yellow sheet that as attached or was put with your program. What I was going to say was the lady that had to be cancel out has recovered, and Carol didn't get a chance to tell us that. But there's an amazing story there, too. And maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. But Nanette Crist Johnson's title here, The Elixir of Life, Rediscovered, I think is going to be something that everybody is going to be interested in as to what it is and how it was discovered and how it was developed. She comes to us from Virginia Beach. A lot of you will remember her when she spoke originally because her gifts have been in the area of clairvoyance as an artist and many other areas, and she has these paintings that she has done, some of these beautiful paintings which a number of you will remember. If you're not, and even if you are, now is your chance to welcome Nanette Crist Johnson back with us again this afternoon here in 1996.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. I'd like to open this with a brief interfaith prayer. If you don't pray, if you would just join us in a moment of silence or make a wish. Our Heavenly Father, Mother God, beloved I Am Presence, we ask that you be with us here, opening our hearts to your infinite love, so that we might understand the wonderful gift you're about to give to us, that each one here can dissolve any misconceptions, obstacles, or feelings of unworthiness that we may have. And we can really be receptive to all the things that you want to give to us. For so long, we have known that we have the gift of immortality in the spiritual world, and now you're giving us a gift of extended immortality on earth. We pray, therefore, that we will be ready for this and use it wisely and generously. These things we pray in the name of all that is sacred. Amen. Now, can you hear me better? Okay. They can turn up my microphone for you. I'm going to speak today on the elixir of life rediscovered today. You know, some time ago I realized that God put me on this earth for a purpose, as He did all of us, and I got so far behind that I realized I'd have to live forever to accomplish everything. It wasn't my first priority. However, through our research and studies, we have found indeed that there is a philosopher's stone. Indeed, there is a way to extend the human lifespan. What you're about to hear is an understanding of how God, the creator of all gods, the angels, the ETs, and all of us, created this universe and transformed spiritual energy into light, life force, and eventually matter. This knowledge was shared by all advanced souls, all the archangels, all the advanced ETs, whether they have used it for good or for ill. And many of you are familiar with the biblical and other historical writings about how the patriarchs lived to be very, very old on the earth. Right now, it is being offered for service and for enlightenment of mankind. Indeed, the scientist that has redeveloped this formula feels that it may be something which will enable mankind to be regenerated during a time when the species itself is somewhat in danger from all kinds of things that you've heard about here. Only by understanding the principles of how the macrocosm was created can we understand how the microcosm is created and recreated. we can utilize this secret of life. I can't begin to impart all the knowledge about this subject in the short time that we'll have here. However, we will be speaking later on Monday in depth about this discovery. My husband, Ed Johnson, who is here, will also be joining me in presenting this material to you. Ed is the former CEO of the Edgar Cayce organization, the ARE, and he is now the manager of the Heritage Company. You're going to see also a short portion of a video today, which is only an introduction to the video, about how life is created, about the living seeds of life, sacred geometry, black proteins, multi-strand DNA, which some of you have begun to hear something about, and an incredible bioenergy machine which has never been seen before in public in America. And this is a microscopic bioenergy machine capable of replicating life. I'll show you a little bit of this near the end of the talk, and some Sumerian seals. The Sumerian seals are about how the gods created life on earth. And coming from a Judeo-Christian background, I take that to mean the angels. However, if you want to think it's ETs, that's fine too. About 10 years ago, a Nobel Prize physicist was quoted as saying that he believed physics and mysticism were coming together. I call myself a practical mystic. So I wouldn't presume to stand up here and talk to you about advanced physics if that hadn't happened. And at one time we know that science and religion were one. And we're approaching a time when that will happen again. I've been commissioned and painted by my own inspiration a number of spiritual leaders and teachers, angels and archangels and other historical figures, and many celebrities in the earth today. And at one time I was asked to paint the Count Saint-Germain. Some of you are familiar with him and some of you aren't. But he was an adept who lived in the 1700s in Europe and was recorded in the documents of the courts of Europe to have been the man who never died. Most of the courts of Europe were more interested in his miracles and his phenomena that he was able to perform in his elixir of life than they were in his greater message, which was to create a United States of Europe to avoid revolution and war and all the other things that were going on at the time. But Saint-Germain had an elixir which is written in the documents, and you can obtain the book by Isabel Cooper Oakley on Saint-Germain, that this elixir enabled him to live indefinitely. He also gave a face wash to Madame Pompadour's friend that rejuvenated her cells and allowed her to look 20 years younger. Well, we know that history has said you can live indefinitely if you're one with God, one with the universal. And science has always been looking for how this could happen. And I believe that we finally found the scientist who accomplished this, and he did it with the assistance of God and Saint-Germain. When I did the portrait of Saint-Germain, the first time I did one of him, it was merely through meditation, seeing what I would call an Akashic vision of him, which is like watching a three-dimensional hologram movie. I didn't get to actually see him in person or talk to him. But the second time I did a portrait of him, which was commissioned by the Lairds who are here today, they're wearing violet up here in the front, for their healing chapel. This is the portrait that was done. And he did come in, and there was amazing things that happened in my family's household when he made his appearance. He was there for a brief time, and then he came back to talk to me while the portrait was being sketched. And I said to him, how do I know you're the real Saint-Germain, because that wasn't even your actual name? He adopted that name when his family had to renounce their royal title. And he said, what would you like to know? And I said, I'd like to know, first of all, about your elixir. What did you do to stay young? And I would like it to be verified for me. And he said he did a number of things. One was that he used a form of consumable oxygen, which in 1985, as far as I was aware, was not available. Secondly, he showed me a brilliant blue-green water plant, which is a form of algae. And the closest thing to it is the super blue-green algae. And he said while he was experimenting with algae and the photosynthesis process, he discovered how the life force itself was captured through the sunlight and through the ethers. And then he developed an elixir. And the elixir looked dark in certain conditions because it absorbed light and it emitted light in other situations, and it was unstable. He also discussed with me, I said, it's recorded that you took flaws out of diamonds for the King of France. How did you do that? And he said, I didn't, I grew new diamonds. In 1985, that also was not being done. I told this to family and to friends and to some of the places where I spoke on these subjects. I asked Saint Germain in 1985 if he would work with another scientist in our time to redevelop his formulas for the sages of our time. Because, as many of you realize, we're on an extended or prolonged course of making things better here on planet Earth, and we'd like to have some of the sages here longer with us. Then, 5 years later, I finally found this man, and he was led to me through the Lairds again. He was invited to speak at their home. And as soon as I looked at this man, he's from the same part of the world as Saint Germain in Europe, I knew right away that he was working with him. And he said he'd unlocked the secret of life. So I spoke with him privately and asked him many questions about his work and his elixirs and his developments. And indeed, he did say that his first discovery was made in 1985. At that time, I should back up a moment. Some of you will probably realize who I'm talking about, but for the sake of our discussion, we're going to call him Dr. G. And the reason is that some of his work is being reviewed in this country by the FDA for medical purposes, and until it is, he doesn't want his identity made public. But I think you'll be hearing about him soon, and maybe we can get him to come back and talk here. In 1965, he developed cold fusion, and our government classified it. He went on national TV to get it declassified. It was the only successful cold fusion process that was known at that time or today. And his life was in danger, so he wound up leaving the country. He went to Europe, and while he was there, he developed a process to grow diamonds synthetically. Does that sound familiar? I should also say that this is one of the most persecuted scientists that I've ever heard of in history. He was put in concentration camps twice in his life, once as a child and once when he was older. I don't think anyone has suffered more than he has to bring this information to mankind. So frustrated was he at that point that he was dying of heart disease and cancer, so he came back to America to be with his wife's family. And he had left a brew out on the desert for 6 months. And in this brew, he had plant genetic material combined with what he used as a process with cold fusion and the diamond growing process to develop crystals. Nothing had happened in 6 months. So he prayed to God one night and asked God, please to remove him from this planet or give him the tools for his mission. And he poured off the rinse water and found little microcrystals coming out of this brew. And these little crystals captured the sunlight and the life force and the solar energy. And they're like solar batteries for our body. And he discovered that whatever he put with them would replicate life. Not harmful life forms, but beneficial life forms. God showed him then, over a period of the next several years, how to develop this. Of course, one of the first things he did was cure himself. And in the true spirit of science, he used himself as the first guinea pig. Through this process, he then unlocked the secret of life and found that there is a way to regenerate the body, the mind, the spirit, and this is a self-perpetuating system. he questioned, why is it that we should only have double-strand DNA and RNA? Why don't we have multi-strand? And this led him to further discoveries. When I said to him about Saint Germain, I explained to him that I knew that his formula was dark and absorbed light in one situation and emitted light in another situation. He said, "Oh, yes. How did you know that?" And I said, "It's unstable, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes, it's very unstable. I have to work with it." And I said, "What about consumable oxygen?" He said, "Oh, that's just a byproduct of the cold fusion. I've given it to the Mayo Clinic and other clinics to help with burn treatments and so forth." So he had many of the same things already. It's taken 10 years for him to refine this formula and develop it. Today, we're able to bring it to this country under the name of Life Everlasting, and he, in other countries, is calling it SumerTech, after the Sumerians. And it's because the information was also on the Sumerian seals that he was seeing under his microscope. What does this liquid elixir do for us? I already said that it's like a solar battery for our bodies, and there's little microcrystals that, when absorbed into the bloodstream, bring in life force, and they create a superconductive field, so we become energized. Our whole aura, our whole physical being becomes energized, as if we're young, and it regenerates the body. The wonderful thing is, I wasn't interested in perpetuating human lifespan so that they could just continue to do evil in the earth, as I'm sure most of you aren't. But from what we've been hearing of the doctors and scientists that have worked with it in various forms, they say that it also helps people become more enlightened. We've had it tested by various other methods, and we find that it's working mostly on the upper chakras, that is, the spiritual centers, or you might call it acupuncture points, from the heart to the crown. Whereas almost all the other formulas that we've dealt with are working on the chakras from the heart down. It also creates bioenergy machines. And these bioenergy machines look like 2 bell jars, or actually 4 bell jars, and they function on hyperdimensional hologram. They replicate whatever is put into them. Then they create black proteins. Now, when the microcrystals are stacked up in lattice form, that's when they form themselves into these bioenergy machines. From above, part of it looks like a pyramid, and then another part looks like an ankh. It's very fascinating from the position of sacred geometry, which I was familiar with as an artist. These black proteins that are created through the bioenergy machines absorb light. It's just like the fetus in the womb. It creates life in the darkness, and then later on, they emit light as they begin to regenerate. For the sake of our use, this means that we will, by taking this into our bodies, we'll be able to have longevity, health, and enlightenment. Some scientists say they expect it to double the lifespan. Others have great prospects of it curing all kinds of diseases. For this talk here, I will not make any specific references to medical claims. If you want to hear about those, you can go to Canada or Mexico or Europe, where they are utilizing it extensively in various forms, and his other discoveries as well. It aids in immunity. It's a super antioxidant. Drives up your HDL level, which means it's going to clean out the plaque and the hard fat and harmful things out of the blood, so it'll help with circulatory problems. Contains high levels of GTP and ATP, which will help your body to produce the sugars necessary to regenerate the cells. And the best thing of all is the people who have been taking it all tell us that they get a sense of well-being and inner peace. I myself have been taking it for some months now successfully. My husband and I were traveling for 9 weeks, and speaking and working without a day off. And I usually would get depleted after about 2 weeks, but I never did run out of energy. So for me, this was a major breakthrough. I went another about 4 months taking the formula, and I found that whenever I have a dip in energy, I take it. And it's not a stimulant, but it definitely brings in the life force. Dr. G calls it the breath of God. I've worked in the holistic health field for 25 years, and I can honestly say that I've never seen anything even remotely close to this. My husband and I have not made any money personally off this discovery. We're here to offer it to you in the best way possible so that everyone can find it affordable. What happened after I realized what Dr. G had was I asked him, despite the fact that he had had some problems in this country with various government agencies and pharmaceutical companies and so forth and so on, if he would let us bring it here. And he said yes, he would, but right now the Heritage is the only ones allowed to offer it, although we haven't asked for any exclusives on it. And we wouldn't, because we want to heal the planet and heal all people on the planet. He told me that he knew someone was working with him through this development, and now I think he knows that it is Saint Germain and our heavenly godparents. There's a lot more that I could say, but I want to give you an introduction to the video and what you're going to see. It does get into some in-depth physics, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. On the Sumerian seals, most of you are familiar with the civilization of Sumer. And according to archaeologists, it's one of the oldest civilizations on the earth. Well, I and Dr. G both consider the Sumerian seals to be even pre-Sumerian. And like so many other things, the archaeologists haven't dated it back far enough. And I'm sure you're aware from your studies here that the ETs and human life itself was evolved long before science admits. And on these seals, it shows in pictures how the gods created life. When I first saw them, I thought they were badly drawn pictures. But actually what they're showing is blown up pictures of microscopic processes that go on when one unlocks the secret of life. And Dr. G has videotaped those processes and identifies each element in the seals with each element in the life process that he has rediscovered. The first half of the video does not show the process, but it does discuss how life is created in the macrocosm and in the microcosm. As Hermes wisely put it, as above, so below. As on the outside, the inside. And we know that everything happens in the spiritual world before it happens in the physical world. We always think something first before we do it. So this has always existed in the spiritual world. And I believe that the sages of all times have known that this was available to mankind. When Dr. G took the solarized microcrystals and put them into what he calls superlattice work, stacked them up like little bricks, they formed themselves into scrolls. And these scrolls developed wells. The anti-gravity is also mentioned in the film. What happens, as I understand it, is that you get a vortex going of force fields. If you looked at it from above, it would look like a Star of David with 6 points or 6 vortices moving. And then in the 7th, which is in the center, it folds in and forms a scroll or a well or a vortex. Light comes into this vortex, and it's compressed, and it forms into matter. That's what goes on in the universe in what we call black holes. And then it's recycled. It also goes on in this process in our bodies when we have a self-perpetuating, self-regenerating system, so that our bodies would always be recycling the proteins and the matter and the cells within. It's only by understanding cold fusion and anti-gravitational forces that this discovery has been made. I want to ask, when we show this video, that you do not tape it. You can record my voice. I'm going to read an exact transcription of what was said by Dr. G. He has a very charming foreign accent, and some people have difficulty in understanding him. So I'm going to read to you what he said in this portion of the video, and then you can follow along. Can we turn the video on, please? If I could have this light down here, that would help. I can see the screen. This one right here. Thank you. We don't want any sound on the video. Okay. This is one of the Sumerian seals, and on it says, "God, maker of the gods, thou God of the gods of life, who makes the sun helpful to proclaim his glory. Inborn the blueprint of life with directional time, the breath of creation stretched into space like a flash." This is the Big Bang. "And so was born receptors with gravitational flow, generating the gravitational wave. The runaway cosmos has been curved by the force of life, at first by way of hyperdimensional interference, interlocking the gravitational waves, taming the violent flow, 4 clockwise gravity waves merging into one, and 4 counterclockwise merging into one, at 45 degrees apart. Then the 2 systems merge into one, and neutralizing the spin, harnessing the force of life. The cosmos is alive, filled with the breath of God. This braids into the neutrino. Then came the birth of the gravitron from the neutrino, with 6 gravitational waves plunging through the 7th, as the Sumerians tried to teach us. The 6 centrifugal forces of the spinning waves pulled towards the center by the 7th one, forming an imploding force, giving birth to nuclear wells. The negative force that was necessary in curbing the universe from running away from the explosive force. Molding the gravitational waves into matter by way of hyperdimensional interference. This is the way that matter is born, building mass that accumulates gravity. The greater the mass, the greater the gravity.
The picture be changing or should be staying?
No, it should be staying. He doesn't show the other pictures until later. Galactical systems formed from life force in superlattice, virgin stars in sacred geometry. But once the force of gravity triggers the fusion process, stars become suns, the firmness of matter. Sacred cosmic dark matter, neutrinos, liquid neutrinos, burn to produce particles, photons, electrons, neutrons, protons, and elements with chaotic interference. Matter is marching towards its death as anti-gravitational forces burned out the suns, interlocking and plunging through the center, the 7th. These form a black hole, recycling the supernova. So does matter die. The core of the sun holds liquid neutrinos, the source of light, hydrogen, and sacred water. The life that originates on the sun, as the Sumerian tries so hard to tell us, the total anti-gravity of the cosmos is equal with the total gravity of the galactical system. The two are in balance to hold the universe together. One compresses as the Big Bang, and one expands as the Big Bang, and one compresses as the black holes. We'll see later a number of other pictures that will illustrate this. One of the difficulties that Dr. G had in filming this portion of this process that goes on in the macrocosm and the microcosm is that when you have anti-gravitational forces in play, they emit no light, and you can't film something in the dark. He was able to film a number of the microbes and other microscopic processes by the light-emitting crystals that he developed. When we're all done with this, if we have time, I'll take a few questions, but for now I'd like to proceed with the film. Is there a remote so I can advance it? You can? Okay, could you advance it to the next picture, please? Okay, right there. That's good. This is the shrine of God, or the seeds of life, that were depicted by the ancient cultures, that have been restored today and brought back to life. The Egyptians tried to replicate this unsuccessfully. The Sumerians, who were also the pre-Atlanteans, visited us in the past from our twin sun and our twin solar system that is formed from sacred matter, which is dark matter. In order to form sacred matter, it had to be in superlattice, like a marching band in order. Dark matter is still a star with no nuclear fusion. Therefore, all life forms, genetic material, in this system is in superlattice and sacred geometry, which is basically a tetrahedral structure. Forming black proteins with electrons paired in amino acids and multistrand DNA. This particular picture is shown later as the seeds of life are formed under the microscope. Such electrons, when paired and their spin controlled, form superlattice and become superconductive. Not only free electrons will flow, but also the force of life. Therefore, superconductive, they have access to free energy. The gods built and destroyed Atlantis. We are also a part of this experiment. The Babylonians called them the gods of gods. They brought some of the fragments and prehistoric artifacts and seals that document the colossal knowledge of these people. The physics of tomorrow, of the cosmos, of the origin of life, of anti-gravitational machines. Since they came from an anti-gravitational solar system, all of their equipment and machinery is based on anti-gravity. These anti-gravitational forces give you energy, whereas gravitational forces, which our system is based on, take energy from you. Only they can hold the true information. Their secret codes of the Sumerians, the gods, the pre-Atlanteans have never been broken. This is the first time it has been broken. The Babylonians, Assyrians, and Egyptians are poor copies with little carryover of information. In our documentary, we shall begin with Sumerian mathematics and the force of life. You will be absolutely stunned when you see the rest of this documentary. Can we advance it to the next picture, please? Okay, that's good. This is showing, can I disconnect the microphone so I can come over and see it? This one? Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're still on.
Good. This is showing, getting feedback. Okay, is that good? This is showing what I described to you, the 6 vortexes of energy that fold in on each other and form a 7th in the center, and that makes a nuclear well. And Dr. G actually drew these pictures himself because he was able to observe it, but he wasn't able to film it because it was in a dark field. You can advance it to the next one. And here you see the well forming. That's okay, keep going. He drew an eye in the center. It looks like the eye of God.
Keep going.
And yes, keep going. There's another illustration of the same thing. And another. And he has all the mathematics involved. He's very much a mathematician, a physicist, and has a number of patents and PhDs. And this is a very small Sumerian seal that shows the forming of the forces as we described. And then these are his drawings again. I'd like you to keep going until we get to the bioenergy machines, and I'll tell you when that is. These are the seeds of life forming together, and the forces coalescing around the center. Can anybody see that in the back? Can you see it all right? Okay. He's moving ahead quickly as possible. While we're doing this, if anyone has a question, I'll be happy to try to answer it. I'm not a physicist, but fortunately I had a father who was a scientist, and he fed me Scientific Americans all the time. Yes?
Do you have the information from John Melchizedek on his sacred geometry and what he's giving out?
I'm familiar with some of it, yes.
What was the question?
Yes. He asked the question about Melchizedek and the videos and the information that he's giving out, and he said some of it is similar to this. I have no doubt that there's a number of sacred, now there you are, they had the proteins stacked in superlattice that he drew. Go ahead, keep going. There it is. Okay, stop right there. This is the bioenergy machine. You'll get a better picture of it in a minute. Believe it or not, this is magnified 5,000 to 10,000 times. When the black proteins were stacked up and they formed in free energy, they linked together because they're super intelligent. And with these crystals, the crystals link together and form the bioenergy machines that replicate life. Later on, there's a number of even better pictures of this. And they look like bell jars. He says that they function on hyperdimensional hologram. So they're able to reproduce whatever they're programmed to reproduce. And in this case, it is life itself. That means that we're able to regenerate these cells. And the proteins hold the life force and the secret of life. Science has always known that, but they didn't know what to do about it. And out of the bottom, you're seeing some of the formations that are being made from this. Can we advance it a little further? I'd like to show them more if we have time. There's a number of mystery schools and people who have taught sacred geometry that are aware of the spiritual significance of a number of the things you're going to see in the video. But no one in modern times has ever offered to the public any information, if they knew about it, of how it was actually done in the physical world and utilized to bring in free energy and regenerate life. There it is again.
Should I stop or go?
No, keep going. He's showing you pictures here of some of the ancient Sumerian and pre-Egyptian artifacts which show over and over again the black proteins and the bioenergy machine. The bioenergy machine actually does, there's one of the Sumerian seals. The bioenergy machine actually does look like a Maltese cross. And in the center of it, the heart of it, from above, looks like a pyramid. And when it opens up and the black proteins start coming out, then it forms an Ankh, which is, of course, the sacred Egyptian symbol as well. Okay. I think that's all we're going to have time for right now. Yes, you can shut it off. It's about a 2-hour video. Unfortunately, It took him a great deal of time and expense to produce the video, which is not yet edited, and we don't have permission to reproduce it on video here, but you still have the audio and the narration, so you can utilize that in your studies at home or wherever. Do we have any questions? There's probably a million questions. Yes, in the back.
Let's get him up here so we can get it on the tape for sure.
Later on in the video, we also show how this process happens under the microscope, and you can see the crystals forming, and you can see the life forming and reproducing itself while it's actually in motion.
Okay.
Some of these last symbols in these pictures are very similar to be seen in the Keys of Enoch, the Book of Knowledge.
Yes.
And they look very familiar. Is there any association?
I'm sure that the Keys of Enoch were done by a very learned man, written by a very learned man who is familiar with, yes, Hertek, who's familiar with all of the ancient scrolls and writing on these subjects. I have no doubt that the initiates of every culture had some portion of this knowledge. And I haven't studied everything in the Keys of Enoch, but I'm familiar with it and I've read a lot of it. Yes, and I would say that one of the challenges to people who are into the keys has been how to apply this, how to make it relevant. And now we have a way to make it relevant. Thank you.
One short question before my main question. Where can you get the actual documentary? That's one question. You know, that video, you just the full video. And then also, could you go into a little bit of how did Dr. G, what was the process where he was able to break, you know, get into the codes and discover this? I mean, what areas was he studying, pursuing when he came to this knowledge?
Okay, the first question was, where can you get the video? Right now, the video is not available. He's only made about a dozen copies for scientists and doctor, and I'm very honored that he gave us a copy to utilize for educational purposes. He has not yet edited it, and he has not yet released it, but I understand it cost him a couple $100,000 to make it, so I'm sure he will release it when it is finalized, and we'll let you know about that. You can stay in touch with us. And the second part of the question, where did he go? Oh, yeah.
The process of how Dr. G this.
Right, the process. I met Dr. G in 1990 approximately, and at first he had only, through turning his energy from physics to biophysics, found a way to bring in the life force into the microcrystals. And then later on, after he found that this had all kinds of wonderful properties, he found out as experimenting with them that when he stacked them up, they began to form into the bioenergy machines that would replicate life. He was experimenting also with his other anti-gravitational cold fusion and everything else. And one thing that developed out of this was, in his research, he's very learned. He was familiar with some of the Sumerian texts and seals and those of other cultures. I don't know if he read Zechariah Sitchin or anything like that. All I know is he was familiar with the seals, and someone gave him some actual artifacts that are from various cultures, which aren't even available in museums, from South America and from ancient Sumer, where they have little, in gold work, microscopic gold work of the proteins and the bioenergy machines and all kinds of things that we're seeing depicted there. And so he realized what he was seeing under his microscope in discovering how the life process occurs was already known by the ancients, and in fact, they had a colossal knowledge even beyond where he had gone at that point. With the information of what he calls the tools of the gods that were depicted there that he uses in his processes, he was able to decode the rest of the seals. And there are, I understand, tens if not hundreds of thousands of seals, and he has many thousands of pictures that aren't in the documentaries yet, but he's already done, as far as I'm aware, 4 or 5 films.
One of the things I've looked at
in the process of studying life itself. Can you hear it? Okay.
we can.
One of the processes I've looked at in the process of studying life is a thing called melanin and melanoidin, neural melanin especially. And what you can find on the internet today is essentially that melanin and melanoidin is self-regenerative. It's a black substance. It is sort of separate from DNA. My question to you would be is, do you think that's similar to what you're running into there?
I haven't, the question is about melanoidin. I haven't yet studied it enough to make an educated comment on that. It sounds like there may be some similarities, but I don't know enough yet if it's the same as this. I know that there are microcrystals that are like little solar batteries involved in this process, which brings the black proteins into activity and actually creates them. And from that, we can develop the multi-strand DNA and the self-perpetuating, self-regenerating system.
One other comment. Two of the pictures I saw in the video is very similar to pictures that you can find on the internet concerning the third form of carbon, which is carbon C60, if you're interested in looking at that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, I have a friend that maintains she is an angel. This friend of mine died, and of course the body was out the next day with a friend in it, and she maintains that angels come out of crystals. Is this correct?
The question is, do angels come out of crystals? From what I've seen of angels, first let me back up on crystals. I discovered through the spiritual information that's been given to me in contacting the various master teachers that I was painting and so forth, that everything in the physical universe has a crystalline structure, whether it's amorphous or whether it's defined. My sense of angels is that they are beings who have not been incarnate in the earth. I know some people use the term more loosely to include all spirit world people, maybe even ETs, but they include everybody in the term angels. But my perspective is that angels are not incarnate in the earth and have not been in the physical plane. Doesn't mean they can't visit us here. So in that sense, I would say, because the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual, indeed there is a spiritual matter that reflects organization and order and a crystalline structure. So you could imply that angels could be born out of a crystalline format.
Okay. What she maintains, of course, is that she took the body at the age of 3. And it was a very interesting experience with her, and she still is. So are we doing something backwards when we start becoming and working with crystals? This is what I wanted, because they're looking for human bodies. The angels are.
Mm-hmm. The angels that I've dealt with were not fallen angels. They were high-level angels. Of course, we have fallen angels and other spiritual beings that will take possession of a human body, if possible, against the owner's will. But the angels I've dealt with only work with people. I have seen them and have experienced them while doing spiritual healing, walking into a person's aura. In my case, they would come in from behind, put their hands against mine, and send the healing energies through the heart and through the hands. But that is not taking possession of the body or trying to own it. I simply invited them in to assist with the spiritual healing, and I think a number of healers do that. They sometimes say they're working with the Holy Spirits. My experience has been it's the Holy Spirits.
Well, she tells me that she can see anything that's wrong with the human being here, but she said that she gets close to wanting to heal them and backs off. And I said, that's good. They have to learn how to heal themselves.
Ideally, this is true. The best thing...
Thank you.
Thank you. She asked about a person healing themselves, and having been familiar with spiritual healing and a number of great healers in my lifetime, some of the greatest, many of them died young. And one of the reasons was that they were so unselfish, they kept offering their healing capabilities to people who might not merit it. And they took on the indemnity of the person that was receiving the healing. Sometimes the person who received the healing didn't even do anything to give back to them. It's a natural law of the universe. There's an equal give and take, and we need to give back whenever we receive. And so they died young because they depleted their spiritual reservoir So whenever a healer does a healing, I suggest that they ask, number one, that God's will be done, and number two, that the indemnity, or some of you might call it karma, of the individual not be passed on to the healer. And that the individual who is being healed or requested the healing can work out their problems and whatnot on their own in another way through selfless service, prayer, and various forms of spiritual sacrifice. Is there any other questions? I think we've just about run out of time. I'd like to make a few more closing comments on what you've seen. And Dr. G, we do have, thank you, we do have the formula available here in oral form. You just have to leave it on your tongue for 5 full minutes so it absorbs into the bloodstream. It's delicious. It tastes like wine. I say to my husband, I like to drink the whole bottle, not just take 10 or 15 drops. It takes self-control because it's so good. And it's like a vibrational vitamin. You'll find that as you take it, it'll help you feel stronger, more enlivened, more at peace. And I have seen a few people who had spontaneous spiritual openings where they saw aura instantly for the first time in their life, but they were at the stage where they were ready for that, and so it was comfortable for them. So we're over here in the next room. If you would like to visit us, I'm offering each and every person here who has time to come and have a free taste or a sample of this elixir. And God bless you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Thanks, Nanette. Did I understand you to say you had to get permission to bring it here, otherwise it just comes from Virginia Beach?
Yes, we had to get special permission from Dr. G to bring it to America at all.
Oh.
But we do bring it from Virginia Beach and from the Heritage, and you can obtain it through the Heritage at this time.
Or here. Or here, yes. Okay, thanks very much, Nanette. Now we're getting ready for the next one, and I think that's going to pop some of your gaskets, perhaps, but take about 9 minutes and be back.